Topic of today's video is government controls and regulations over your personal property. Remember we talked about in a previous video about those bundle of rights. And if you don't understand what a bundle of rights, the bundle of rights are, right up here is a video link. It's a little eye up there in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Click on that and watch that video and then come back to this one. But as you learned, if you watch that video, the bundle of rights gave the landowner all of these things, that they can do, and they could do it absolutely. But as time has gone on over the years, what's happened is governments have placed controls and restrictions on what a private owner can do and not do with their property. And there's an acronym called P.E.T.E, and it stands for Police Powers, Escheat, Taxation, and Eminent Domain. Those are four buckets or four areas where the government places government controls and regulations on private property. And I want to talk about each one here. There's some key terms that we're going to learn in this video. And those real estate key terms are police powers, escheat, taxation, eminent domain, intestate, and condemnation or condemnation proceedings. All right, so let's get to our first letter of our acronym, P.E.T.E. It stands for police powers. A couple of things you got to know about police powers. Number one is there is no compensation, meaning no compensation from any government. It's what it is the government's going to tell you what you can and can't do, but there's no compensation. And title, which means ownership in real estate, does not pass. It does not pass. So when we see police powers, or when you think about police powers, we typically correlate it to things like zoning laws or building codes or fire codes. Those are all examples of where the government has placed regulations on what you can and can't do with your property. And by the way, no compensation. So if those regulations have an adverse impact on the cash flow of your business or your property, that's on you. You're responsible for it. The government will not compensate you whatsoever. Now, these laws and these regulations can be much broader, and they are much broader. Another example is environmental laws, such as the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. I actually had an example one time. I had a student in my class many years ago, and him and his wife had purchased like 40 or 50 acres of timber land in Oregon. And they actually had like $1 million mortgage on it. And it was based on the value of the logging that was on there. Shortly after they closed on the property, the federal government came in and declared that an off-limits property because of the spotted owl, which was on the endangered species list. So they owned this 40 or 50 acres. They had $1 million mortgage that they were making payments on, and they had absolutely no right to do anything. And that's just an example of how impactful some of these regulations can be on private owners. The next part, the second letter of our acronym is E, and it stands for Escheat. And the root word of Escheat is cheat, E-S-C-H-E-A-T-E. I forgot to put the C in there. So Escheat, a couple of things we have to know about escheat. Number one is no compensation. So the government's not going to pay you. And the other thing you need to know is title may pass. All right? The two times that we're going to see escheat is, number one, somebody dies without a will. And when somebody dies without a will, they have died what we call intestate. And that's one of our key terms, intestate. They've died without a will. And there's absolutely no heirs. There's not even a 20th cousin that they have found that can get the estate. So we have somebody that has died intestate, no heirs. They owned property. They had a savings account. They had stocks and bonds. We have to have a mechanism from a legal perspective to wrap up that person's affairs. Escheat is a doctrine that basically tasks the government with doing that. Now, which government agency will do that is based on an individual statute within that state. Every state has different requirements as far as who's going to do it. Will it be the city? Will it be the county? State by state. But what is uniform is it's the government that will liquidate that estate, and then all the money from that liquidation goes to the state. So it becomes the property of the state. The second aspect of escheat is, let me give you an example. Let's say that there is a person that owns a piece of property on the corner of 12th and Main Street. And it's an absentee owner, so the owner lives in a different state. And this property is vacant. It's becoming a den for drug dealers and prostitution. The city has tried many times to get a hold of the owner to say, do something with it, and the owner has just abandoned it. Well, there has to be a mechanism for the city, because it's a public nuisance and a public hazard, to take care of that issue. So they're going to file what's called an escheat proceeding, and they're going to go in, and in the end, what's going to happen is title to that property will pass to the government agency, so then the government agency can take care of that property, whether they tear it down or whatever that they do, but they have to have a mechanism to take care of that public nuisance. Now, in that case, title will pass, and there is no compensation whatsoever for that owner that abandoned the property, which makes sense. All right, the third letter in our acronym is called T, which is for taxation. Taxation is a government control because there is punitive damages if you don't pay your property tax. And what I mean by that is if you don't pay your property tax, then the county's probably going to sell a tax lien certificate or a tax deed to an investor. And if you don't, as the property owner, redeem that tax lien certificate or that tax deed within a statutory period of time, you will lose ownership. You will lose ownership of it. Now, we're not going to talk any more about taxation. I've done another video on taxation and how to calculate property taxes. So I'm going to put a link right up here at that eye, just that little eye in the upper right-hand corner. Go ahead and click on that, and that will explain everything in detail. The fourth letter in our acronym of P.E.T.E is eminent domain. A couple of things we have to know about eminent domain. Number one is title, and title means ownership. Title passes. Title passes from the private owner to the government. Number two, just compensation. The government has to give you just compensation. And number three, it must be for public benefit. That is the criteria for eminent domain. So what is eminent domain? Eminent domain is a doctrine, and it actually comes from the United States Constitution that says that if the government takes private property, then certain things must happen. Now let's look at it from the 50,000-foot view. The government needs to have the ability to acquire private property because we need military bases, we need schools, we need courthouses, we need interstates and highways. Now under the Constitution, it requires that just compensation be paid to that private owner. So if a school board wants your 5 acres to put a high school, they're going to notify you of that fact that they want it. Then they're going to use eminent domain to get it. Now, the school district's going to have to give you fair market value. Now, structurally, the way it happens, you don't need to know this for the licensing exam, but I want to illustrate how the process works. They're going to go out typically and get 3 independent appraisals done on it. And then they're going to average the 3, and that's the fair market value. Now remember, you can challenge the eminent domain proceeding. You can do that. You have your right to go to court. You have your right to due process. I will tell you most of the time you're going to lose. I mean, that's been my experience. Typically what I find in eminent domain proceedings, it's not so much the fact that the government wants to buy your property and you don't want to sell, it's the price. And here's why. If your house is worth $50,000 and you know Warren Buffett wants to buy it, well, all of a sudden it's worth $100,000, right? Or at least you think so. We call that the deep pocket syndrome. So knowing that your property is worth $50,000, but the government must want it, so now you think the property is worth $100,000. That's not going to happen. You're going to get the average typically of 3 independent appraisals. All right, so just compensation. They have to pay you for it. Title does pass. Remember, title means ownership. So once this proceedings are over, then you're going to pass title through a deed from you to that government agency. And remember, it has to be for the public benefit. Obviously, schools and military bases and highways all benefit the public. But there is a legal process under eminent domain. How does the government legally proceed to do this? Well, it's called the condemnation proceedings, and that's a key real estate term that you need to know. All right, one thing I want you to remember here is title passes, just compensation given, and it's for the public benefit, but the legal process that the government will use to get your property is called the condemnation proceeding, or the condemnation process. That's the legal process that they use. They actually condemn the property. And in many jurisdictions, they'll slap a sticker against the window of the house and say it's been condemned. So anyways,